भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी.
Hello friends, as a part of celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we ran a podcast series called Bharat ki Kahani Meenakshi Lekhi ki Zubani, 75 stories for 75 days run up to India's 75th Independence Day. Now these stories, which were earlier available on the website of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Spotify and various other platforms, will now be available to NAMO app virtual meet as Bharat ki Kahani Meenakshi Lekhi ki Zubani. Happy listening, keep listening and stay tuned to NAMO app. It's an initiative of NAMO app volunteers. I thank them all through you. On 22nd November 1830, in a small village called Bhojla, near Jhansi, a little girl was born to a Kori couple, Sadoba Singh and his wife Jamuna Devi. They named her Jhalkari. As the only child of indulgent parents, Jhalkari grew up with an independent spirit. Sadly, Jhalkari's carefree days came to an abrupt end when her mother suddenly passed away. The small girl had to get busy learning household chores, but one day her father took her to a nearby forest to teach her archery. He had made a special bow and arrow for Jhalkari, and he taught her archery and how to fight with lathis and swords. She practiced rigorously till one day Jhalkari was in the forest to cut wood. She was attacked by a wolf. She struck the wolf with her axe, but she lost the grip on the handle and fought with the wolf with her bare hands. Over the years, Jhalkari's skill and courage grew tremendously. One day, a similar tale of Jhalkari's bravery reached the ears of Puran Kori, a soldier from Nayapura, Jhansi, who served in the artillery unit of Rani Lakshmibai's army. Puran Kori showed interest in marrying Jhalkari, and her father accepted Puran's proposal, and soon Jhalkari and Puran were married in a simple and traditional ceremony. With many common interests, Puran and Jhalkari were happy together. One day, Puran asked Jhalkari to come with him and meet Rani Lakshmibai on Shivratri. They went to the court to meet Rani Lakshmibai. One by one, all presented their respects to Lakshmibai. When it was Puran and Jhalkari's turn, Rani Lakshmibai was amazed to see Jhalkari, who had an uncanny resemblance to the queen. Soon Jhalkari began to spend time with Rani Lakshmibai, and they bonded over their common love for hunting and shooting. One day, Lakshmibai told Jhalkari that she is forming a women's army and that she wanted Jhalkari to be part of that army. Jhalkari was honored to join the army, and she began her training and soon gained expertise in all aspects of warfare. At that time, British had firmly entrenched themselves in India, and the people were reeling under the oppression. Anger against the British was simmering, and with this, the first war of India's independence took place in 1857. In the form of a mutiny of Sipais in town of Meerut, the flames of revolt soon spread to Jhansi. Over the next few months, mutinies, rebellions, wars were seen in Delhi, Lucknow, Kanpur, and many other cities. General Hug Rose, the commander of the Central India Force, was given the task to quash all the rebellions. He had directed his army to surround Jhansi and capture Lakshmibai, and with a strong army, General Rose launched an attack on Jhansi on 23rd March 1858. Rani Lakshmibai valiantly faced the enemy with 4,000 of her troops, but the soldiers of Jhansi were outnumbered. It was now apparent that Jhansi was losing the battle. Lakshmibai inquired from her court men about the delay in help from Nana Sahib's army. She was worried. When she got to know that Tatya Tope's army had been defeated by General Rose and help may not come as planned. Upon knowing this, Rani Lakshmibai held an emergency meeting of the War Council, wherein Jhalkari appraised the queen of the decreasing number of soldiers and depleting food sources. She emphasized that if enemy forces breached the walls, they would have to engage in hand to hand combat within the fort. She requested the queen to leave the fort by whatever means in order to protect her from any danger. Jhalkari suggested that she will disguise herself as Maharani and take a small unit of soldiers and leave from the front of the fort. In the meantime, Maharani can escape from other side of the fort. And once she is in a safe place, she can reorganize the forces and attack the British again. Soon preparations got underway to execute their plan. Jokingly, Maharani said to Jhalkari that she would fool the queen herself also in the battle clothes. Meanwhile, the British bribed a soldier in the queen's army to enter the fort, and the soldier's treachery cost Jhansi dearly. The confusion and chaos provided Rani Lakshmibai the opportunity she was looking for. She left the fort. Meanwhile, plowing through the enemy's ranks, Jhalkari went straight to General Ross's camp. She fought bravely for an entire day without anyone discovering her true identity. But the pretense could not last too long, as the British realized that she was not the queen and ordered to surround Jhalkari. Jhalkari was captured and taken to General Ross. There, General Ross said to Jhalkari that she deceived them by disguising herself as the queen, but she was betrayed by one of your own. Jhalkari replied, "Those who betray will suffer the consequences. As for me, you can shoot me. I'm prepared to die for the queen." To this, General Ross said to his men that if even 1% of their women were as mad as this one, the British would have to abandon everything here and retreat. General Ross ordered to take Jhalkari away and keep a strict guard on her. However, Jhalkari was not the one to be stopped. Later that night, she ran away from their tents. At dawn, when General Ross launched an attack on the fort, he was shocked to see Jhalkari there. A fierce battle ensued. Jhalkari and her soldiers were successfully reducing the enemy's number when she got to know that her husband has been martyred. Strongly she promised herself to not let her husband's sacrifice go in vain. She now fought the battle with renewed vigor. The British troops began to target her, and the bullets hit her in the chest as she fell. A few more bullets hit her. Jhalkari breathed her last, sacrificing her life for the sake of the freedom from imperialist forces. While the contributions of Jhalkari were unknown till they were brought to light by the historians, today she is a symbol of pride, not just for her community, but for the entire nation. Over the years, her greatness has been celebrated through plays, stories, and songs, and she is revered as Virangana, a brave Jhalkari. The statues built in her honor and the Virangana Memorial Trust in Bundelkhand have kept the legend of Jhalkari alive. Even today, she serves as an inspiration to young girls and women throughout the country. One particular poem immortalized Jhalkari, imprinting her in the minds of people forever. And you know what the poem was? Macha Jhansi mein ghamasan, chahu aur machi kilkari thi, अंग्रेजों से लोहा लेन रण में कूदी झलकारी थी.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी.
This legend comes from Ulal in Karnataka, from southern India, during the second half of the 16th century, say about 1550 onwards. Rani Abaka Chota was the first Tuluva queen of Ulal, who fought the Portuguese in the later half of the 16th century. She enjoyed immense popularity among the people of her bravery and caring nature towards the people. In the Principality of Ulal, the then Queen Haria Abaka was on her deathbed, and the Portuguese were expanding their sway with their evil expansion plans around Goa. Ulal was already under the Portuguese rule, taken as a vassal kingdom. It paid its yearly tribute to the Portuguese rulers. This immoral loot hurt the queen immensely. who wanted her principality to flourish, not perish, under the foreign rule. She also feared for the sovereignty of her motherland. The dying queen expressed her worries and concerns about the safety and sovereignty of her principality to her brave daughter, Abaka Devi. Abaka, solacing her dying mother, promised her that she would take care of Ulal and keep it free from the evil designs of the foreigners. The mother soon died, and Devi Abaka took over as the queen. Her first act was to gain love and support from her subjects. She asked for this support to keep the Portuguese at bay and not unwavering support from the masses. Her husband, Veera Narasimha, the king of B. Angadi, saw trouble in Queen's staunch opposition to the Portuguese. He tried convincing Abaka to think twice before taking up arms against the Portuguese authorities. He was of the opinion that Ulal and Bangadi, being small principalities, were of no match to the powerful foreign invaders. Before the steely resolve of Abaka, he had to give up. Queen Abaka went ahead with her opinion against the Portuguese. When asked to pay annual tributes, she outrightly refused. She maintained that Ulal was a sovereign principality and would neither pay the so-called tribute in cash or kind or take orders from any other authority. This was an open defiance of the Portuguese. In a radically daring move for those times, that too coming from a woman, Abaka got the merchant ships built for her kingdom and leveraged her cordial and profitable trade relations with the kingdom of Arabia. But on their return from one of the commercial voyages, the Ulal fleet was apprehended by the Portuguese authorities. Only one of the workers of the ship with great difficulty managed to reach back to Ulal. He appraised her queen of the act of the Portuguese loot and exploitation, and that the commander of the ship was under the Portuguese. As the royal rule demands, she sent an envoy to the Portuguese to get back her ships and the commander. However, much to her fury, the Portuguese replied by attacking Ulal. Rani Abaka stood and saw the cannons booming from across the river. The enemy had left no choice for the queen. She gathered her horses and the forces and decided to attack Portuguese fort in Mangalore. It was indeed a very daring move to pick up arms against supposedly much bigger army and enemy. Portuguese were sure of their win, and the governor at Mangalore, Ribeiro, had to run for his life as Queen took over the Mangalore fort. The governor at Goa reacted sharply, and the Portuguese rallied at Ulal to avenge their defeat at the Mangalore fort. But Queen Abaka, with a sword held high and will to free Ulal even higher, was ready with her men to fight the enemy till her last breath. Queen Abaka showed legendary courage as she led her forces against the Portuguese. The battle lasted 4 days, at the end of which Portuguese were down at their knees. The Portuguese were driven out of Ulal, never to come back again. Queen Abaka kept the promise given to her dying mother and her commitment to her people that her life was to protect Ulal. It is believed that Portuguese had made several attempts to capture Ulal, as it was strategically placed only to be repulsed by Abaka each time for over 4 decades. For her bravery, Abaka Devi came to be known as Abhaya Rani, the fearless queen. She is also believed to be one of the earliest Indians to fight colonialism and is sometimes considered to be the first woman freedom fighter of India at the state of Karnataka. She is celebrated along with as one of the foremost women warriors and patriots. According to traditional accounts, she was an immensely popular king, and this is also attested by the fact that she is even today part of folklore. The queen's story has been retold from generation to generation through folk songs and yakshagana, a popular theatre in coastal Karnataka. She was seen as a caring queen who worked late into the night, dispensing justice to her people. Legends also claim that Abaka was the last known person to have used the Agnivana, the fire arrow, in her fight against the Portuguese. Some accounts also claim that she had 2 equally valiant daughters who fought alongside her in her wars against the Portuguese. Abakka's memory is much cherished in her hometown of Ulal. The Veera Rani Abakka Utsav is an annual celebration held in her memory. The Veera Rani Abakka Prashasti Award is given to distinguished women on that occasion. On 15th of January 2003, the Indian Postal Department issued a special cover on Rani Abakka. All hail Rani Abakka, Jai Rani Abakka.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी.
Today we remember the valiant life of Birsa Munda. He lived a short but valiant life wherein his heroic actions and noble deeds made him Bhagwan for his numerous followers. Born on 15th November 1875 in Ulihatu village of present-day Jharkhand, Birsa spent his childhood in abject poverty in a tribal Munda family. This was the time when exploitative British Raj started penetrating into the deep jungles of central and eastern India, disrupting the tribals living in harmony with nature and natural resources. The British introduced a feudal zamindari in Chota Nagpur region, destroying tribal Khuntu Katti agrarian system. The Raj brought in the outsiders, moneylenders and contractors, as well as feudal lords, which aided the British in exploitation of tribals. The unrelenting missionary activities continued to operate with the active support of the Raj, insulting and interfering in the religio-cultural ethos of forest-dwelling Adivasis. Young Birsa grew up watching all this unfolding before his eyes and began to understand how these colonial forces and Dikkus, who were enemies of the Adivasis, worked against the interests of the local people. This acted as a fuel to firm up his resolve to fight against this unholy nexus. During 1880s, young Birsa closely witnessed the Sardari Larai movement in the region, which was demanding restoration of tribal rights through non-violent methods of sending petitions to the British Raj. However, the oppressive colonial regime paid no heed to these demands and petitions. The zamindari system soon reduced the tribals from the status of landowners to that of land laborer. The feudal setup intensified and forced labor that was known as Veeth Bigari in the forested tribal areas. The exploitation of poor, innocent tribals now reached a breaking point. It all culminated into Birsa taking up the cause of Adivasis. He showed a new light in matters of religious domain to fellow tribals. He stood firm against missionaries who were belittling the tribal life and culture. At the same time, Birsa worked for refining and reforming the religious practices, discouraged many superstitious rites, brought in new tenets, new prayers, reformed many habits, and worked for restoring and reviving the tribal pride. Birsa impressed upon Adivasis about Sir Mare Firun Raja Jai, or victory to the ancestral king, thus invoking sovereignty of the tribals, ancestral autonomous control over the land. Birsa became a mass leader and began to be considered as a Bhagwan and Dharti Abba for his followers. He made the tribals aware of exploitative and atrocious nature of all the vested interests. He knew who the real enemy were along with exploitative Dikkus. It was oppressive British rule. During the struggle, Birsa Munda had clearly identified that colonial British rule was the root cause of all the problems and oppressions. It was amply clear to him that Abuja Raj, Sitar Jana, Maharani Raj, Tundu Jana, which meant let the kingdom of the queen be ended and our kingdom be established. Bhagwan Birsa ignited the spark in the minds of the masses. The Mundas, Orans, other Adivasis and non-Adivasis responded to his call and joined Ulgulan or revolt against colonial masters and the exploitative Dikkus under the leadership of Birsa for their social, economic, political, and cultural emancipation. Birsa asked the people not to pay any rent, attacked the outposts of feudal, missionary, and colonial British authorities. With the traditional bows and arrows, the tribals of central and eastern India waged an effective armed resistance against the British regime. In doing so, however, Birsa was careful that only the real exploitators were attacked and common people were not troubled. Birsa became an image of vitality and divinity. Soon he was captured by the British police and lodged in jail, where he died in captivity on 9th June 1900. But Bhagwan Birsa Munda's spirited struggle did not go in vain. It compelled the British Raj to make amends to their conduct and behavior. British were forced to bring in Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act of 1908 for recognizing the rights of the tribal people. Post-independence, many such legal provisions were brought in by the independent Indian government to the constitution as constitutional protection. Some of them were like Article 335A, 341, 342, 366, and several other such provisions exist in the Constitution of India today. In addition to Special Rights Act, like Forest Rights Act, many special provisions legally provided protection to the tribals and the rights of the tribal, not only on their land, but in services as well. The British regime, after all this, had to step in to abolish Veet Bihari or forced labor as well. Bhagwan Birsa Munda continues to inspire millions of Indians even 121 years after his death. He is an icon of valor, courage, and leadership. He was a leader who took great pride in his rich culture and great traditions, but at the same time did not shy away from reforming his own faith wherever, whenever necessary. Bhagwan Birsa Munda is one of the tallest icons of a freedom movement. The revolutionary movement and struggles organized by him were marked by immense courage and supreme sacrifice, and continues to inspire Indians all over the country.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
India's freedom struggle saw active participation from several dynamic women such as Aruna Asif Ali, Sarojini Naidu, and many others. Women's entry into male-dominated spaces shattered all the British notion of Indian women or women being subordinate, weak and docile. Most of the women, those who joined the freedom struggle, were aware of the dangers they were exposing themselves to. Yet, they voluntarily decided to join the freedom struggle and breaking the bias. One such brave woman was Gulab Kaur. Gulab Kaur was born in 1890 in Bakshiwala village, Sangrur district, Punjab. Very little is known about her early life and childhood. However, what is definitely known is that she was married to a man named Unsung. After her marriage, the couple left for Philippines with the ultimate objective of migrating to the United States of America to escape economic hardships back home. Considering this, things would have been a lot better had she decided to follow this, but passion and love for her nation took her to another trajectory altogether. During their journey, as luck would have it, they came across members of the famous Gadar Party, an Indian revolutionary organization primarily founded by Punjabi Sikh and Punjabi community. During their journey, as luck would have it, they came across members of the famous Gadar Party, an Indian revolutionary organization primarily founded by Punjabi immigrants determined to kick the British out of India. At first, it only had Punjabi Indians who lived and worked on the west coast of the US. Later, the movement spread to India and other Indian communities joined them. This contact further emboldened their passion to actively participate and contribute to the freedom struggle of the nation. Just when the couple were to sail back to India, Unsung changed his mind and asked Gulab Kaur to stick to their original plan to move to the USA and lead a peaceful life away from the struggle that they were to face back in their homeland. Gulab Kaur, however, had made up her mind. Now nothing could stop her from moving back to her motherland and dedicate her life for freedom of her country. No one could believe her decision, but Man Singh had to surrender to the will of Gulab Kaur. He moved to USA and Gulab Kaur set sail to India with a steely resolve to dedicate her life to the cause of the country. Alongside 50 other Gadarites, Gulab Kaur boarded SS Korea from Philippines. They shifted from SS Korea to Shamaru in Singapore to stay undercover. On reaching India, she became an active participant in places like Kapurthala, Hoshiarpur, Jalandhar, and mobilizing masses for the armed revolution. She took upon the charge to distribute literature linked to the freedom movement to the masses. Since anyone in possession of such material could be arrested, she maintained a tight vigil on their revolutionary printing press. Besides engaging with anti-British public sentiment, she also distributed arms and ammunition to members of the Gadarites, fronting as a journalist. She was a great orator as well. She gave moving speeches, encouraged scores of others to join the Gadar movement. Her inspiring words inculcated the feeling of nationalism even in children. She went door to door and played a major role in inculcating the feeling of patriotism in the people of Punjab. She worked undercover for almost 10 years without ever being discovered by the British officials. However, as they say, the sun's rays cannot be hidden for long. The stories of her smartness, her aura, and her determination soon started flowing in Punjab. Everyone talked about her escapades, her sacrifice that Gulab Kaur had performed for her country by leaving her husband and a possible peaceful life in a foreign land. The stories reached the ears of British and they started keeping a close watch on her movements. After 2 years of intensive search, Gulab Kaur fell into the hands of British. They arrested her over sedition charges and later jailed her at Lahore jail. It is said and believed that she was tortured heavily by the British to give away the details about the working of the Gadar party. However, she did not flinch an inch and never gave away even a single detail. She was possessed of such a grit, and this grit needs to be admired in this iron lady. She endured all the torture with utmost determination. The British soon gave up and could not contain her in the prison for more than 2 years. After being released, she openly motivated people to stand up against the oppressive British government. Her only dream was to see her country independent and free from imperialist powers. However, as the luck would have it, she died in 1931, 16 years before India got her independence. She may not have survived to see her hard work being fructified, but it's the sacrifice and dedication of such women that we are living freely in a free and independent country. Shri S. Kesar Singh dedicated a book in her honor titled Gadar Di Thi, Gulab Kaur, which was published in 2014. The book is written in Punjabi and gives a detailed account of her life. Let us all dedicate this day in remembrance of the Gadar Di Thi, Gulab Kaur, and never forget her contribution towards India.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी.
Today we remember the warrior queen of Karnataka, Rani Chinnamma of Kittur, who was one of the first Indian rulers to lead an armed rebellion against the British East India Company in 1824. That is to say that after Rani Ebakka's battle with the Portuguese, she was the next in line, a woman to lead an armed rebellion against the British. Born in 1778 in a humble Lingayat family in Kakati, a small village in the present Belagavi district of Karnataka. From a very young age, her father encouraged her to train in battle skills like horse riding, sword fighting, and archery. As they say, you can recognize a flower's fragrance from the time it starts budding. Chinnamma was the talk of the town in her village for her bravery and skills. At the age of 15, She was married to Raja Malasaraja Desai, the king of Kittur, and soon they were blessed with a son. But as the luck would have it, the things changed drastically when the king passed away in 1816. Chinnamma was just recovering from this tragedy when she had to withstand the news of her son's demise in 1824. As they say, only testing times reveal tough sailors. As the Queen of Kittur, Chinnamma took charge of the kingdom. She adopted Shivlangappa after the death of her only son and proclaimed him as their heir of the throne. But this was not acceptable to the East India Company as they decided to meddle in. The British East India Company denied the adoption of Shivlingappa as the heir of Kittur and ordered his exile from the kingdom under the pretext of the doctrine of lapse. Doctrine of lapse is the same doctrine which will be followed later in case of Jhansi, and Lord Dalhousie was the propagator of the doctrine of lapse. The doctrine gave British the rights to annex any kingdom which did not have a biological heir. Rani Chinnamma of Kittur, however, defied order to expel Shivlingappa from the throne. She sent a letter to the governor of Bombay to plead the cause of Kittur, but Lord Elphinstone turned down Chinnamma's request. The state of Kittur came under administration of Dharwad Collectorate. In charge, Mr. Thackeray, and Mr. Chaplin was the commissioner. Both men did not recognize Chinnamma as the regent and Shivlingappa as the ruler, and appraised Rani Chinnamma to surrender her kingdom. But she again defied British order, and this led to the breakout of a war. The British attempted to pillage Kittur's treasures and jewels, which valued around 15 lakh rupees, but were unsuccessful. They attacked Kittur with a force of 20,000 men and 400 guns, which came mainly from the 3rd Troop of the Madras Native Horse Artillery. In the first battle between the British and Kittur on October 1824, British forces faced heavy losses. St. John Thackeray was the British collector and political agent, was also killed during this first battle by Kittur forces. 2 British officers, Sir Walter Elliot and Mr. Stevenson, were also taken hostages by Rani Chinnamma's forces. The British were taken aback from the fierce response that they received from Rani Chinnamma. To avoid further destruction as accounted due to First War, Rani Chinnamma negotiated with the British Commissioner Mr. Chaplin and the Governor of Bombay, under whose regime Kittur fell. She released the hostages owing to the British promise that the war would no longer be continued. However, the promise turned out to be only an act of deception. Humiliated by their first defeat at the hands of a small Indian ruler, and that to a woman, Mr. Chaplin treacherously returned with much larger forces from Mysore and Sholapur to attack Kittur once again. Kittur Chinnamma and her forces were outnumbered by the large strength of British forces in the Second War against the British rule. Rani Chinnamma was defeated in her last battle and captured by the British, who imprisoned her at the Belhongal fort for life. She passed away in a few days in confinement with the dream of a free Kittur in her heart and mind. They say it's better to die for a cause rather than to live without standing up for it. Rani Chinnamma of Kittur was exemplary of this principle in real life. Chinnamma is an unsung hero who showed the world that a woman, a citizen, a mother, a widow, an individual, be it any role you take on, can stand against as mighty as the British to uphold justice and righteousness and the greater good of the people. Rani Chinnamma of Kittur is still remembered for her valor. During the freedom movement, her brave resistance against the British forces became the theme of several inspirational plays, folk songs, lavani, and stories. Rani Chinnamma's first victory against the British forces is still honored annually in October during the Kittur Utsav held in Kittur. On September 11, 2007, Rani Chennamma's statue was unveiled at the Indian Parliament complex in New Delhi. A popular train, which is a daily train of Indian Railways that connects Bangalore and Kolhapur, was also named after her as Rani Chennamma Express. Her life continues to be an inspiration for all.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी.
Who doesn't know Jhansi ki Rani Lakshmibai? Another fearless and fierce leader was Akkammacharyan, nicknamed Jhansi ki Rani of Travancore. Akkammacharyan was an Indian freedom fighter from Travancore in Kerala, born on 14th February 1909 in a Nasrani family at Kanjirapalli, Travancore. She completed her education in 1931 and started working as a teacher at St. Mary's English Medium School, where she later became the headmistress. She worked in this institution for about 6 years, though Akkamma was a teacher by profession. Her actual dream was to see her nation free, so she quit her well-respected job of a teacher to join India's freedom struggle in February 1938. Meanwhile, in Kerala, the people of Travancore had started an agitation for a responsible government. C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, the Diwan of Travancore, banned and suppressed the agitation. Banning led to a civil disobedience movement, but the British had imprisoned all the protesting leaders who were leading the agitation, so Akkamma was chosen to lead the movement. When other leaders were jailed, Akkamma was chosen for her zeal, courage, boldness and fierceness, and of course the potential to lead the people. Akkamma, who was hardly 29 years at that time, was aware of the seriousness of the assignment and knew what the consequence could be, yet she volunteered to do the job. She organized a massive rally to put pressure on the rulers to release the jail leaders and to install government in Travancore. Akkamma led more than 20,000 people who joined the protest demanding revocation of the ban. Akkammacharyan led this rally of protesters. Also there was the demand for the dismissal of the Diwan C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, who had several charges against him. The British police chief ordered his men to fire on the rally of over 20,000 people to quell the agitation. But Akkamma shielded the protesters coming between the armed authorities and the people. She said, "I am the leader, shoot me first before you kill others." Akkammacharyan is quoted to have said these words in the year 1938 when she stood before Colonel Watson with such fearlessness, passion and grit that he was compelled to withdraw his order, and a big massacre was thus avoided. Akkamma became popular than ever before for her grit, courage and fearlessness. People across the country hailed her for her unflinching courage, and Gandhiji gave her the title of the Jhansi ki Rani of Travancore. Not only in Travancore, but Akkamma had mobilized women all over, motivating them to join the freedom struggle in October 1938. Akkamma was entrusted to organize Desa Sevika Sangh, female volunteer corps. She traveled tirelessly across the country and appealed to the women to join as members of Desa Sevika Sangh. Her untiring efforts led to a surge in the number of women volunteers in the local bodies. On 24 December 1939, she attended the annual conference of the Travancore States Congress, for which she was sentenced to a year's imprisonment. In prison, she was harassed, verbally abused, and tortured. But this could not dampen her spirits. After her release from jail, she became a full-time party worker and then went on to become its president. She supported the Quit India resolution passed at the Bombay session of the Indian National Congress in 1942. Akkamma faced a series of arrests for violating ban orders and staging protests. Even then, her spirits could not be deterred. Post-independence, she was elected to the Travancore Legislative Assembly in 1947. And once she quit active politics in 1967, she served as a member of the Freedom Fighters Pension Advisory Board. In her autobiography, she summed up her life when she wrote, "Shakespeare has said that world is a stage and that all men and women merely players. But to me, this life is a long protest against conservatism, meaningless rituals, societal injustice, gender discrimination, against anything that is dishonest and unjust. When I see anything like this, I turn blind. I even forget who I'm fighting." Education makes a difference, but education does not mean just theory. It means exposure to right ideas, inculcation of right values, and aspirations and love for nation. Perhaps the undaunted spirit of a Kamacharian and their roots in the same and in the passionate desire to free one's motherland. A Kamacharian passed away on 5th May 1982. A statue was erected in her memory in Velambalam, Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Namaste, hello. Today we brought the story of Rani Tarabai. We are remembering one of the most gallant personality of Indian history, who was known as Rania dos Marathas, or the Queen of the Marathas by the Portuguese. She is Rani Tarabai Bhosle, the brave daughter-in-law of Chhatrapati Shivaji and one of India's greatest medieval monarchs. Among the few women in history to save a kingdom by sheer force and willpower, Rani Tarabai's unflagging courage and indomitable spirit are at par with legendary Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi and Rani Abakka Chota of Ulal. Yet little is written about this warrior queen or her incredible story. Born in 1675, Tarabai was the daughter of Hambir Rao Mohite, the famed Sar Senapati, commander-in-chief of Shivaji's Maratha army. Fiercely independent as a young girl, she was well trained in sword fighting, archery, cavalry, military strategy, diplomacy, and all other subjects of statecraft. A woman who witnessed the rise and fall of the Marathas, Tarabai was just 8-year-old when she was married to Shivaji's younger son, Rajaram. This was an era when Mughals and the Marathas were constantly at war. In 1674, Shivaji had been crowned the ruler of the independent Maratha kingdom established by him. Under his able leadership, the empire quickly became a key political force in India at the height of Mughal power. However, the legendary leader passed away in 1680. With the years after his death seeing the Marathas pass through their toughest time. Soon after the death of the Maratha king Shivaji, the year 1689 saw the eldest son of Shivaji, Sambhaji, being captured and put to death after Raigad fort fell to a Mughal army of over 15,000. Sambhaji's wife Yasubai and son Sahu were captured and taken to the Mughal court as hostages. During the same battle, the new Maratha kingdom, Rajaram, Shivaji's second son and Tarabai's husband, managed to escape from Raigad using a disguise. He eventually made his way to Ginji Fort in the present-day Tamil Nadu before setting up court at Satara. However, in yet another blow to the Marathas, he passed away in 1700 after an extremely short reign. A month after his death, Tarabai took over the reins of Maratha kingdom as regent for her 4-year-old son Shivaji II. Realizing the urgent need for strategic and stable leadership if the Marathas were to stop the Mughal onslaught, led by Aurangzeb himself, the 25-year-old widow also took command of the Maratha army. When the Mughal army heard this news, they were delighted by the prospect of an easy end to the Maratha menace, assuming that a woman and an infant would not provide much resistance. According to the chronicles of Kafi Khan, the court chronicler of Mughals and the author of Muntakhab al-Lubab, ordered the drums of rejoicing to be beaten after the death of Rajaram. They never believed that the weak, contemptible and helpless queen could pose a threat to the powerful Mughal army. However, they would soon learn otherwise. Though grief-stricken by the loss of her husband, Tarabai did not waste time on tears. Instead, she threw herself in organizing a well-planned and vigorous opposition to Aurangzeb. An intelligent woman, Tarabai had earned a reputation during her husband's lifetime for her knowledge of civil, diplomatic and military matters. She used this knowledge to lead from the front, traveling between forts, forging crucial partnerships, mobilizing resources and men. A skilled cavalry warrior, she also motivated her commanders and soldiers by personally leading aggressive attacks on the enemy. In his memoirs, Bhim Sen, an officer in the Mughal army, mentions that Tarabai was a stronger ruler than her husband and that Tarabai became all in all and regulated things so well that not a single Maratha leader acted without her order. In her 7-year period as regent, Tarabai single-handedly directed the Maratha resistance against the massive army of Aurangzeb, then the mightiest ruler in the world. As the Mughal chronicler Kafi Khan wrote, she won the hearts of her officers, and for all the struggles and schemes, the campaigns and sieges of Aurangzeb up to the end of his reign, the power of the Marathas increased day by day. An indomitable warrior queen who was deeply devoted to her kingdom, Tarabai did not just prevent the Maratha Confederacy from disintegrating when it was at its lowest ebb. She played a crucial role in its rise to a national power, as by the year 1760, the Marathas de facto controlled almost all of India. In the midst of repeated failures in quelling the Maratha resistance, an aging Aurangzeb died on March 2, 1707. Facing a power vacuum at the top, the Mughals craftily released Shahu, Sambhaji's son and Tarabai's nephew, to divide the Maratha leadership by sending a new claimant to the throne. The idea succeeded when Shahu challenged Tarabai and Shivaji too for leadership of the Maratha Confederacy. This dispute quickly transformed into a battle. However, given Shahu's legal claim to the throne, the chieftains sent by Tarabai to fight him started defecting to the other side. And finally, in 1708, with the support of Peshwa Balaji Vishwanath's diplomacy and the new Mughal emperor's resources, he succeeded. Shahu I was crowned the Maratha ruler at Satara, and Tarabai was sidelined. Not one to give up easily, Tarabai established a rival court in Kolhapur the next year, but was deposed after Shahu and Rajasabai, Rajaram's second wife, joined forces to put Rajasabai's son Sambhaji II on the Kolhapur throne. Tarabai and her son Shivaji were thrown into prison, where she spent 16 years and her son eventually died. However, later Sambhaji turned hostile, forcing Shahu to switch sides. Finally freeing her from the prison, Shahu invited Tarabai to stay in Satara Palace, albeit under house arrest. But the former queen's role in Maratha polity was not over. At the age of 73, Tarabai stepped out of the shadows after Shahu fell seriously ill. With no direct descendants of Shivaji to appoint as his heir, she revealed that she had conceded her the existence of a grandson, Ram Raja, after her son's death, fearing his assassination by Rajasabai and Sambhaji II, and that he was now 22 years old, a Maratha prince waiting for his destiny. So Shahu adopted Ram Raja, his heir, before he died in 1749. With Tarabai's help, the young prince ascended the Maratha throne. However, later, when he became close to the powerful Peshwa, Nana Sahib, and refused to accede to her wishes, Tarabai denounced him as her grandson. Nonetheless, in 1752, Tarabai had to settle for a pact that acknowledged Nana Sahib's authority in return for the freedom to settle into her life's final role, that of a powerful quasi-sovereign dowager. Tarabai breathed her last at the age of 86 in 1761, a few months after Ahmad Shah Abdali decimated the Maratha army at the Third Battle of Panipat. Had the indomitable queen not taken charge in 1701, it is quite likely that Marathas would have had to face a similar defeat much earlier, and the history of India would have been very different. Tarabai was a brave, ambitious and level-headed ruler. who put her kingdom above everything else. A woman of unflagging courage and spirit, Rani Tarabai Bhosle of the Maratha left an indelible mark on Indian history. आसमान में असंख्य तारे, आसमान में असंख्य तारे, एक तारा निराला था, ताराबाई नाम था जिसका, ताराबाई नाम था जिसका वीर शिवाजी की पुत्र वधू ने मुगलों को ललकारा था।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Namaste, hello, and today we are listening to a new story, Ahilyabai Holkar to you. In small village of Chondi in present-day Maharashtra, little Ahilya was born to Mankonji Shinde and Sushila Shinde. Mankonji Shinde was the patil or head of the village. Like all other children, Ahilya learned to read and write and was identified as a very bright child from a young age. She used to perform bhajans and chant mantras at village temple. Incidentally, or as fate would have it, Malhar Rao Holkar, a commander in the army of Maratha Peshwa Bajirao I and ruler of Malwa, stopped in Chondi on his way to Pune and saw the 8-year-old Ahilya at the temple service in the village. Impressed by her piety and character, Malhar asked her hand in marriage to his son, Khande Rao Holkar. On the Peshwa's advice, Ahilya's parents agreed and she was married to Khande Rao in 1733. Ahilya accompanied Khande Rao on many campaigns. She was brought up by her mother-in-law, Gautama Bai, which is credited today for the values instilled in Ahilya. She trained her into administration, accounts, politics, etc. and eventually handed her over her Khasgi Jagir in 1759. Such was the Indian society in those times, when a young girl was taught about subjects that are even today thought of as subjects of male domain. In 1754, Khande Rao, alongside his father Malhar Rao Holkar, laid the siege of Humbar Fort of Jat Raja Surajmal of Bharatpur. However, during the battle, Khande Rao was martyred. Ahilyabai Holkar became a widow at a young age of 29 years. She loved her husband so much that she decided to perform sati with the pyre of her husband. That was when, in a famous instance, Raja Malhar Rao Holkar stopped her from performing sati. He made fervent emotional appeals to stop her. He said, "Beti, मेरे बेटे ने मुझे छोड़ दिया, जिसे मैंने इस उम्मीद से पाला था कि वह मेरे बुढ़ापे में मेरा साथ देगा। अब क्या तुम मुझे, एक बूढ़े आदमी को, अथाह सागर में डूबने के लिए अकेला छोड़ दोगी? क्या तुम भी मुझे बिना किसी सहारे के छोड़ दोगी? मैंने और रानी गौतमा ने तुम्हें अपनी बेटी की तरह पाला है। अब तुम और तुम्हारा पुत्र ही होलकर के वंशज हो, तुम ही मालवा का भविष्य हो। फिर भी यदि तुम अपना विचार नहीं बदलना चाहती हो, तो पहले मुझे मरने दो." His emotional appeal led to Ahilyabai change her mind and she decided to help her father-in-law in ruling Malwa. Ahilyabai was a fine ruler of Malwa and Malhar Rao had great trust in her ability to lead the kingdom. In an excerpt of a letter to her from Malhar Rao in 1765 illustrates the trust he had in her ability when sending her on a military expedition to Gwalior with a huge artillery. He wrote, "चंबल को पार करके ग्वालियर के लिए आगे बढ़ें। आप 4 या 5 दिनों के लिए वहां रुक सकते हैं। आपको अपनी बड़ी तोपखाने रखना चाहिए और जितना संभव हो सके उसके गोला बारूद की व्यवस्था करनी चाहिए। बड़ा तोपखाना ग्वालियर में रखा जाना चाहिए और आपको 1 माह के खर्चे की उचित व्यवस्था करके आगे बढ़ना चाहिए। मार्ग में आपको सड़क की सुरक्षा के लिए सैन्य चौकियों की व्यवस्था करनी चाहिए." Malhar Rao Holkar, however, died in 1766, 12 years after the death of his son Khande Rao. Ahilyabai then nominated her only son Male Rao Holkar to become the ruler of Malwa. However, in a surprising turn of events, even her son died within a few months. This was the lowest time in Ahilya's life. After the death of her husband, her mentor and father-in-law, and now her son, she felt hopeless. She realized that people of her country needed a strong ruler, and the name of Holkars could not be vanished from the land of Malwa. Following the death of Male Rao Holkar, Gangadhar Rao, Malhar Rao Holkar's Diwan, believing Ahilyabai to be a weak, powerless widow, tried to usurp royal authority for himself by requesting Ahilyabai to adopt him as her son and grant all administrative powers to him, but she promptly refused to do so. Gangadhar Rao then orchestrated a rebellion against her and instigated Raghunath Rao, uncle of Peshwa Madhav Rao, to attack the Holkar domain of Indore. On coming to know about the encampment of Raghunath Rao's army at the banks of river Shipra, through her spies, Ahilyabai immediately dispatched letters to compatriots of her late father-in-law, Mahatji Scindia, Damji Scindia Gaikwad, asking for assistance and assembled the Holkar army with the help of Tukoji. The Bhosles of Nagpur sent their army to assist her, and Peshwa Madhav Rao authorized Ahilyabai to take offensive action against Raghunath Rao. Ahilyabai herself went to the battlefield with her female bodyguards to face Raghunath Rao. Seeing Ahilyabai's courage, Raghunath Rao was frightened and retreated back, stating he had just come to offer condolences to Ahilyabai for the death of Male Rao. Gangadhar Rao was kept under house arrest before being reinstated back to his former position. After the death of her son, Ahilyabai petitioned Peshwa Madhav Rao I to grant her the administration of Holkar dynasty. Some in Malwa objected to her assumption of rule, but the Holkar faction of Maratha army sided with her. The Peshwa granted her permission on 11 December 1767 with Subedar Tukoji Rao Holkar, Malhar Rao's adopted son, as her military head. She proceeded to rule Malwa in most enlightened manner, even reinstating a Brahmin who had previously opposed her. Ahilyabai paid regular visits to her subjects, being always accessible to anyone needing her help. She was a people's queen and everyone loved her. Among many of Ahilyabai's accomplishments, she transformed Indore from a small village to a capital city, whereas the earlier capital used to be in Maheshwar, a town next to the banks of river Narmada. She also commissioned several infrastructure projects in Malwa, sponsored festivals, and gave donations to temples. She built numerous temples even outside Malwa, ghats, wells, tanks, rest houses throughout the Indian subcontinent, stretching from Himalayas to pilgrimage centers in southern India. The Bharatiya Sanskriti Kosh lists the sites she embellished as Kashi, Gaya, Somnath, Ayodhya, Mathura, Haridwar, Kanchi, Avanti, Dwarka, Badrinath, Rameshwaran, Jagannath Puri, and so on. She lived and died for her subjects and is treated as a goddess by the people of her region. Ahilyabai died a natural death on 13th August 1795 at the age of 70, a woman of substance. Ahilyabai's rule is remembered as a golden age in the history of Maratha Empire. As a tribute to the great ruler, Indore International Airport has been named after Devi Ahilyabai Holkar Airport. Similarly, Indore University has been renamed as Devi Ahilyabai Vishwavidyalaya. A poet from the region, Saurabh Mishra Hind, describes her in this beautiful poem. है धन्य धरा सौभाग्य बड़ा जहाँ शक्ति ने था पग धरा अपने न्याय सुकर्मों से मालवा को उद्धार था न्याय प्रिय वो निष्ठावान जगदम्बा ने था अवतार लिया केवल शासन ही नहीं संभाला था प्रजा का सारा भार लिया।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Namaste, hello, and today we are going to listen to the story of Khudiram Bose, one of the youngest and fearless revolutionaries of Indian independence movement was Khudiram Bose and was born in Bengal on 3rd December 1889 as the youngest of the four children to Trilokinath Bose, who was Tehsildar, and Lakshmi Priya Devi. It was a caste family in a small village called Mohobani in Midnapur district of Bengal Presidency. Tragedy struck Khudiram one after the other. When Khudiram was only 7 years of age, his mother passed away. He was shattered. A year after, he lost his father too. One day, his elder sister, Aparupa Roy, decided that she will take up her brother's responsibilities and brought him to her house. Later, Aparupa got him admitted to Tamluk's Hamilton High School. Since a very young age, Khudiram was enchanted by debates and deliberations where topics related to freedom movement were discussed. He was very naughty in his childhood, but soon his life changed. He always dreamt of a free India. In 1902 and 1903, Sri Aurobindo Ghosh and Sister Nivedita visited Midnapur and held a series of public lectures and private sessions with the existing revolutionary groups for freedom. Khudiram, a teenager, also became an active participant. When Khudiram was just 15 years old, he joined Anushilan Samiti, which was a fitness club but was used as an underground society for anti-British revolutionaries. It was led by Aurobindo Ghosh and his brother Barindranath Ghosh. He became close to Barindra Ghosh, who was also co-founder of Bengali revolutionary newspaper named Jugantar Patrika. On a fine day, young Khudiram was fearlessly distributing pamphlets that contained material against the British rule in India, and that caught the eyes of the British. He was arrested then and there. For Khudiram, it was not a crime, as he had envisioned a free Bharat. While Khudiram was growing up, he started to hear about stories where Indian nationalists and freedom fighters were treated without an ounce of mercy. A famous account that is found is of Magistrate Douglas Kingsford, whose judgments on Indian nationalists were never based on merit, but on hatred and partiality. He was unjust, biased, and harsh. Revolutionaries brought before him would be given horrible punishments. On one fine day, there was a large gathering of people before the court where Kingsford was the presiding judge in a noteworthy case against Aurobindo Ghosh, the editor of Vande Mataram, and his publisher, Bipin Chandrapal. A young boy of 15 years named Sushil revolted against the police who ill-treated the Indians. Judge Kingsford, without any remorse or any consideration for the age of the boy, ordered Sushil 15 lashes. The courageous boy shouted Vande Mataram after every lash. This news appeared in the front page of every newspaper of Bengal. Upon reading the harsh treatment meted out to a young boy, the revolutionaries could not contain their resentment and anger. To retaliate this unsavory incident, inflicting corporal punishment on a young kid, they decided to kill this inhuman judge, Kingsford. The British government got the news of it and decided to protect the judge. They transferred him to the town of Muzaffarpur, which is now in Bihar. But as soon as the revolutionaries learnt about the transfer, they decided to send individuals to murder the judge at this new location. Young patriot Khudiram Bose and Prafulla Kumar Chakki were chosen in 1908 by Calcutta-based revolutionaries at Anushilan Samiti to get the job done. The two young revolutionaries landed in Muzaffarpur in the third week of April 1908 with some weapons under the pseudonym of Haren Sarkar and Dinesh Roy respectively. They kept a close eye on Kingsford's movement on a regular basis and planned to assassinate Kingsford in a secluded place. On the evening of 30th April 1908, Khudiram and Prafulla reached a place where Kingsford was. They patiently waited with a bomb. Unfortunately, Khudiram and Prafulla threw a bomb at a carriage which was supposed to carry Kingsford, but it did not. Instead, the carriage had Mrs. Kennedy, the wife of Pringle Kennedy, a leading pleader of Muzaffarpur Bar, and her daughter. Both women died in the attack. Soon after the incident, Khudiram was arrested by the police, but Prafulla escaped from the scene. Young Prafulla shot himself before getting caught by the officials. Khudiram was put on trial. Narendra Kumar Basu argued in his defense so that at least Khudiram's life could be spared. But on a historical day, the British judges confirmed the conviction. On 11th of August 1908, when he was only 18 years old, Khudiram was hanged to death. Post the execution of Khudiram Bose, his body was found erect and face was joyful and smiling. He took pride in his contribution to the freedom movement and he became a martyr. It was also mentioned in many prominent newspapers of the era. Amrit Bazar Patrika, 12th of August edition said, headline, Khudiram's end died cheerful and smiling. The newspaper report wrote, Khudiram's execution took place at 6 a.m. this morning. He walked to the gallows firmly and cheerfully, and even smiled when the cap was drawn over his head. Over the last 75 years, we are breathing in a free nation. It is because of the sacrifice of the teenage revolutionaries like Khudiram Bose, who selflessly gave up their lives for the dignity of their motherland. The following shloka is dedicated to these young lives. Yatha hoken chakren na rathasya gatir bhavet, evam parush karen bina devam na siddhyati. As a chariot can't move with one wheel, similarly without hard work, destiny doesn't bring fruit. His life continues to inspire us to dedicate our life for the country.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी.
Namaste, hello, and today we are going to listen to the story of Rani Avantibai. In the middle of the 19th century, around 1850, lived the famous valiant Rani Avantibai Lodi, who was the queen of Ramgarh, which is the present-day Dindori in Madhya Pradesh. She hailed from a Lodi Rajput Zamindar family. Born on 16th August 1831 in a village called Mankehadi in the Sioni district in the present-day Madhya Pradesh, Avantibai was fiercely independent as a young girl and was well trained in sword fighting, archery, cavalry, military strategy, diplomacy, and all other subjects of statecraft. Her political and combat education made her a good candidate for a ruler. With word spreading about her skills and charismatic personality across the Narmada Valley, she was accepted as a suitable bride for the king's son. When Avantibai grew up, she was married into royal family to Prince Vikramaditya Singh Lodi, who was the son of Raja Lakshman Singh of Ramgarh. Soon after marriage, Rani Avanti and Vikramaditya Singh Lodi became parents of two sons, Aman and Sher Singh. With the death of the reigning ruler Raja Lakshman Singh in 1851, his son Prince Vikramaditya ascended the throne. But fate had other plans. As the new ruler King Vikramaditya started losing health, and his wife Rani Avantibai had to take the lead in running the administration of the kingdom and protecting it from the evil eyes of the British. After the king fell ill, the British refused to accept Avantibai's sons as legitimate heirs to the throne. Given that they were minors, seeing as in their eyes there was no heir to the Ramgarh throne, it allowed them to install their administration to replace the Lodi rule. Introduced by Lord Dalhousie in 1848, the doctrine of lapse was an arbitrary annexation policy that allowed the East India Company to snatch away any Indian kingdom and install their administration in any princely state if the ruler was incompetent or died without a male heir, taking away Indian rulers' rights to appoint successors. In keeping with their land-grabbing intentions, on 13th September 1851, Ramgarh was declared the Court of Wards, with the British-approved administrator, Sheikh Mohammed, installed in place. This decision did not sit well with Rani Avantibai. Deeply insulted by this act of the British East India Company, she bided her time until she could retaliate. After the king died in 1857, she found the perfect opportunity to respond to the foreign insult. She had the administrator thrown out of the kingdom and declared war upon the British rule. By May 1857, news about the incidents in Meerut and Delhi had spread across the subcontinent. For months, people in villages had been preparing for a rebellion after the news of rifles using cow and pig fat began to make rounds. Rani Avantibai too decided to send her message. Avantibai's next step was sending urgent emissaries to the rulers of neighboring kingdoms to join her in the war against the British subjugation. In her strongly worded letters that were accompanied by a set of bangles, the feisty queen wrote, "If you think you have a duty towards our enslaved motherland, raise your swords and jump into the war against the British. Otherwise, wear these bangles and hide in houses." Unsurprisingly, Avantibai's appeal succeeded in rousing a wave of revolution in the central provinces. By 1857, The entire region had joined the armed rebellion. Leading from the front, the fearless queen herself raised an army of 4,000 people and led them in the war. Her first battle took place in the village of Kheri. Avantibai's masterful battle tactics ensured that the British troops were handled a stunning defeat. They had no choice but to back down while she controlled Mandla from December 1857 to February 1858. The British did not take this flight with grace. Determined to wipe out her rule, they retaliated with brutal force and attacked Ramgarh, setting the citadel on fire. As such, the queen was forced to move with her family to the thickly forested hills of Devrigarh. However, Avantibai was not the one to give up without fight. Using guerrilla warfare tactics, she attacked the camp of British General Waddington, plunging the camp into chaos, but unfortunately, her incredible fighting spirit was not enough against the sheer battle power. Eventually found herself trapped by the British forces, who had surrounded Ramgarh. Knowing that her defeat was imminent, she found it better to sacrifice her life than to be taken at the hands of the enemy. On 20th March 1858, she killed herself with her own sword and became a martyr. Her last words are said to have been, हमारी दुर्गावती ने जीते जी वैरी के हाथ से अंग न छुए जाने का प्रण लिया था, इसे न भूलना बड़ो. Our Durgavati vowed to never let the enemy get their hands on her while she lived. Don't forget this. In the years that followed, Avantibai continued to live on in the folk culture of the region, even as her splendid story was slowly erased from history books. Later, in Free India, the Narmada Valley Development Authority named a part of the Bargi Dam project as Avantibai Lodi Sagar Dam in Jabalpur in her honor. India Post issued 2 stamps in honor of Avantibai in 1988 and 2001. Let us honor the brave Avantibai in this Amrit Kal and take inspiration from her valor and determination. I would like to share a few lines which beautifully express Rani Avantibai's contribution. Garji Rani Avantibai, खेचली नंगी तलवार, पवन वेग सी चपल तेज सी, फिरंगियों पर किया वार पर वार, जीती महारानी और मिला रामगढ़ को सम्मान. तुझे नमन अवंतीबाई, वीरांगना तुझे नमन. जय हिंद, जय भारत.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी.
आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां. मीनाक्षी लेखी.